Welcome to the Robinson River. This is one of the major tributaries of the Rappahannock River, and this is where it starts, up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Based on what is living in the water, we can tell if the water is polluted or not. So certain bugs are well adapted to survive in polluted waters, and certain bugs are not well adapted to surviving in polluted waters. So just by seeing which creatures are found in our waterway, we can tell if our water is polluted or not. So, what kinds of pollutants are we looking for? In our Rappahannock River, there are 4 major pollutants. We're going to talk briefly about each one. We have 4 categories that we're going to talk about. The first category being litter, or trash and plastics, things like that you would expect to find in a waterway. Unfortunately, you would expect to find. Our restoration team does a lot of work trying to clean up these polluted areas, these areas with lots of litter. You can actually check our volunteer page on our website, riverfriends.org, to find opportunities for you to help us to clean the litter out of our Rappahannock River. There are 3 more categories. The next one we're going to talk about is oils and gases. So these are considered toxins. This is what is going to be dripping from your car. So if you ever see your car dripping or somebody else's car dripping, please alert them to the fact that their car is leaking and have them get their car serviced, because all of these things that are dripping out of your car are going to land on our roadway, and the roadway is not a permeable surface. This means that all of these oils and gases that land on that roadway are not going to be able to sink in. They are going to have to remain on the surface until they end up in a storm drain, which often empties out into a stream or a creek or one of our Rappahannock River tributaries. We also are going to talk about fertilizer pollution. So fertilizer is one of our big categories of pollution. We have a lot of rural areas around here, a lot of farmland. Who has a family member who is really, really excited about having a green lawn? You may see them putting a lot of fertilizer onto your lawn. What that does is that causes eutrophication in our rivers. This big word, eutrophication, we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth. So, when we get all of these extra nutrients from fertilizers on the land, they eventually get rained out into our waterways. And what happens is all of that runoff water carrying that excess nutrients is going to allow for algae to bloom like crazy in our waterways. When we get these huge sudden algal blooms caused by these excess nutrients coming off of the land, eventually they are going to die off, and they'll die off at about the same time, since they grew at about the same time, and they will be decomposed by a bacteria that takes out a lot of the oxygen from the water and creates what's called a dead zone, which is an area where nothing can live. There's no oxygen to support life. So that is why we care a lot about fertilizers in our waterway. Who has a dog? I like to ask people if they have a dog or not, and if they pick up after their dog, because farmers utilize manure as a kind of fertilizer. It contains the same chemicals that we use in our mass-produced fertilizers, and that is also going to end up in our waterways and cause its own set of problems with this eutrophication. We have a 4th and final category. It is sediment pollution. That is the #1 pollutant of the Rappahannock River. We like to ask students, why might it be such a bad thing for there to be so much dirt and sediment in our waterways? You can let them think about that for a second. The reason that it is so detrimental for there to be lots of sediment in our waterways is because when the water is nice and murky, then there's not enough sunlight making it down to the bottom of the river and feeding our aquatic plant life. So they're not able to photosynthesize because they're not getting adequate sunlight. This sediment also clogs up the gills of our fish and other creatures with gills in our waterways, and it causes them to drown. They can't survive if they can't breathe. We like to say, well, we don't like to say, when there's lots of eutrophication happening, and also there's lots of urbanization where we get lots of construction sites or different things like that causing lots of dirt to suddenly enter our waterway, we get a permanent dead zone, because not only has the oxygen been taken up out of the water, but it's not being replenished by our plants. So those are the 4 main pollutants of the Rappahannock River.